So with this, the title of the breakout session today is Nutrient-Enriched School Meals Are More Important Than Ever. And yes, the title is spot on, as we have seen that in the recent times of a pandemic, such as COVID-19, nutritious meals are important to enhance immunity and resilience against infections and disease. And the role of nutritious school meals is vital. So today in our session, we will look very closely at innovative approaches to school feeding, understand the role of micronutrients in a school child's diet, understand the impact and potential of fortification and bio-fortification to increase the micronutrient resiliency of school meals, and how school meals can reach the most vulnerable, which is even more vital in COVID times. We will have 3 presentations followed by a question and answer session. And I already encourage all the participants, the audience, to type their questions into the question box and send to us. Before we start our first presentation, we have actually prepared a poll question for you audience. And we would like to ask a question and we would like that you vote. So can I have the first question to the audience, please? So as you see, the question is, how many school children does WFP reach either directly or through support of government safety nets with nutritious meals and snacks? Please go and vote. We are waiting a little bit more. Okay, so maybe we should end the polling. So the results is 85.4 million per year what you voted. And so unfortunately, or fortunately, WFP is actually reaching 56.3 million per year, but that means that you are giving much confidence into WFP to reach more with nutritious meals. With this, I would like to introduce now our first speaker. And this is Frances Knight. She's the Senior Nutrition Advisor Systems Analysis for Nutrition at WFP. And Frances, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Regina, and thank you everyone for joining today. So as Regina said, my name is Frances Knight. I'm an analyst in the Systems Analysis for Nutrition team at WFP, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more with some examples from some of the programs that we do at WFP, but also a lot of the analysis that we do to inform that programming and our advocacy, always on this topic of why nutritious school meals are more important than ever. So why are nutritious school meals more important than ever? I'm pretty sure everybody in this audience would really appreciate that malnutrition in all of its forms. So undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies and overweight and obesity is a real global challenge. It's something that's seen in every country in the world in some form. The SOFI 2020 report just came out in the middle of this year, and some of the analysis that our team contributed to it was to really show that a diet that would meet nutrient needs and that would protect against malnutrition, so would be a really good first step to be able to address malnutrition, that would actually cost 5 times more on average than diets that would meet just energy needs. And this would be for an average of different potential groups in the population. Now, when we compared that nutritious diet to how much money people are currently spending on food, we would see that actually very few people would be able to afford a nutritious diet. So around 3 billion people in every different region of the world, 3 billion people spread out over the world would not be able to afford that nutritious diet. Now, it's probably quite self-explanatory that shocks such as COVID-19, but also natural disasters, other market shocks would just make this access to nutritious diets harder. And that in turn exacerbates issues of malnutrition. So that's why it's really more important than ever to have nutritious school meals. Now, why school meals in particular? With school meals, we really focus on particular age groups where it might be really difficult to be able to meet nutrient needs. What you have on this graph is an example from the analysis of the fill the nutrient gap analysis we've done in Ethiopia, where we have across the life cycle some model diets based on the foods that are available in local markets and how much they cost. So the bars that you can see now is the cost of a diet that would just meet energy needs for these different age groups and sex groups. Now you'll see that when I add in the cost of meeting nutrient needs, so this would be energy, protein, and 13 micronutrients, the cost is a lot higher. And it really focuses on getting a lot higher in these prepubescent years and then during adolescence, especially for girls. So we know that then it's probably even more unlikely that these children are getting a nutritious diet at this age group because it's so hard to be able to have a nutritious diet and their households probably can't afford to provide it, or for multiple other reasons, they're not consuming a nutritious diet. Another way to look at this information, this is now an example from Bangladesh. This is a breakdown of school-age children across the population. And you can see that whilst we have the primary school age group, we have quite a lot, about almost a quarter of boys and girls who are underweight. As we get into the prepubescent and then the adolescent age groups, we go into having not only an issue of underweight, but overweight and obesity. So this means that we really need to think about diet quality, not just providing energy to children, but also making sure that our programs do no harm and provide micronutrients. Nutritious diets can actually address both of these problems if they're well designed. There are some challenges, however, in being able to make school meals more nutritious. I'll go into these very briefly before we talk about, hopefully, what are some of the solutions. School meals, if they exist, generally have a very strict budget. So we can't exactly suddenly say, let's triple the quantity of nutritious foods within school meals if they were not going to be affordable for the program, whether it's a government program, our own program, or a partner program. Where that's also going to be hard if there's not good nutritious foods available in the local area, or if there's price shocks, meaning that the prices increase or decrease, meaning that from one month to another, certain nutritious foods might not be available. There might be issues in procuring foods or storing them or getting to markets. Not every school might have a safe storage area, refrigeration or cold chain. They might also have issues of capacity of how many people they have to prepare meals. It might be the only feasible option is to prepare or provide some sort of pre-prepared snack or meal. There's also issues of sustainability. Maybe schools can provide more nutritious meals in the short term, but doing it over multiple years could be difficult. And then, as I said before, COVID is one of the themes for today. We know that COVID has closed many schools all across the world, but it's also meant that it could be more difficult to access markets or that food prices are affected. So these are some of the challenges to keep in mind whilst I go through some of this modelling. So some of the options for making school meals more nutritious that we explore in our team when we're talking with our different country officers, but also government partners about how we could improve things in our programs is, first of all, the inclusion of local nutritious foods to look at what we could afford and be able to improve just by looking at the composition of the different school meals. We also look at bringing in other foods that might provide extra nutrients, and this could be bio-fortified foods, fortified staples, or supplements or micronutrient powders. I would love to speak for a very long time about all of these, but I'll just provide a few brief examples today. This is another example from Bangladesh. This was the school meal that was being provided when we first started the analysis. And at the time, there was no strict target for the level of micronutrient needs that should be met by school meals in Bangladesh. There was a target for providing 30% of energy and protein requirements. Now, this was a very basic school meal of rice and lentils and some vegetables. And what you can see here is that we brought in a target of 50% of micronutrient needs for adolescent girls as a sort of benchmark. And the reason we did that is because we had a lot of data that showed that the diets of adolescent girls at home outside of school was very monotonous, very non-diverse and poor. So at least if we could provide 50% of micronutrients through the school meal, it would really help girls be able to get closer to having nutritious diets. But when you look at this, you can see that for most of the micronutrients, we're not getting close to meeting 50% of needs for adolescent girls. So we did a little bit of modeling with things that could be brought in feasibly for the program. We modeled 2 eggs a week. We would love to model more, but that really wasn't going to be feasible or affordable for the program. But you can see that even with the addition of these 2 eggs, we get a lot closer to that target for many of the micronutrients. The next addition was to change the rice in the meal for fortified rice. And that meant that we met the target for many more nutrients, especially vitamin A, folic acid, and iron. And the last addition was a weekly portion of a concentrated dried fish powder that was locally made, very affordable, and also promoted local production. And that helped to fill the gap a little bit more for calcium. Now you can see this is still not a perfectly nutritious meal, but it really helped to fill a lot of the gaps that were there before, and it was a big improvement. We did some similar modeling in Burkina Faso. I apologize for the French slides. As I said there, we started with a very standard WFP ration, a very non-diverse meal. And you can see that it meets the targets for energy and protein, but it's really quite low in some of the essential micronutrients. So the first action that was very easy to do was to bring in fortified oil, which helped us fill a little bit of that vitamin A gap. The next addition then was a micronutrient powder, which really helped to bring it up a lot higher as well. But there was still a big gap for calcium and vitamin B12. So the final addition was to work with local producers and try and get a supply of yogurt to add to the meal. And that helped to meet almost all of the micronutrient needs. So this is a combination of options that were more feasible for the country office to bring into the program and the government, affordable, but also helped to promote local production. Finally, in Rwanda, the meal that we started out with was very staple heavy. It provided almost 60% or 2/3 of a child's daily energy needs, but not a lot of micronutrient needs. And it was a very, very large plate of maize and a little amount of beans. That's a little bit of an idea of what it looked like. With modeling similar to what I just showed you, we looked at how we could diversify this meal and came up with many different recipe ideas based on what would be affordable and feasible. So this is an example of one of the recipes. It was much more diverse, included some fruits and vegetables, a fortified oil, legumes, and milk. And you could see that it met almost 77% of micronutrient needs for primary school age children, but it was much less energy dense. So it actually still left room for consumption of the food that would be eaten for breakfast and dinner without providing too much energy throughout the day. And that's what it looked like. So how do we actually translate this sort of modeling into the programming that we do at WFP? I'm going to just give a few very quick examples. I showed some of the modeling from Bangladesh before, and I think that one of the key things that came out of the work that we did over about nine months in Bangladesh with the government is that the government decided to adopt this 50% of micronutrient needs target as their target for all school meals. And they also began to incorporate some of these feasible nutritious foods into their programming. In Rwanda, there were recipes developed that incorporated local nutritious foods, and they were incorporated so far into the draft national guidelines for school feeding. In the Philippines, but also Sri Lanka and Timor-Leste, this analysis really helped to make a case for rice fortification in the country. Then through a lot of advocacy, there has been now the inclusion of fortified rice in school meals. And this started as a pilot project, but has really been scaled up, especially into the Philippines as part of standard programs. And last, in Niger, I didn't show these examples, but the analysis really helped to make a case for including adolescent girls in nutrition programming. There were no programs before addressing this group. And so now, based on these analysis results, there was a lot of targeting and a big pilot programming that was set up for this target group. So it's really helped to change not only what's in the programs, but who gets them and what the programs are going to be targeted to do. We've also been pivoting a lot at WFP this year in the face of COVID. I think that probably school feeding is not the immediate sort of programming that we think of with COVID, but it's definitely affected both our needs, but also how we work. In Senegal, for example, a country where there's a lot of rice consumption, there was already a pilot that was planned before COVID to bring in fortified rice to schools in one region. So this would be around 200 schools and 55,000 children. Once COVID hit, there was really sort of this increased need for nutrition. There was a lot of market shocks, a lot of unemployment and other problems. So the country office, but also the government really saw this need to be able to provide nutrients to more people. And so the program was scaled up to cover an additional 60,000 children. In Peru, after many years of campaigning, the government had just started to launch fortified rice in the national school feeding program. When COVID hit, all of the schools were closed, and the government, with a lot of support from WFP, really recognized the need to keep providing nutrients to this group, even though they were no longer coming to school. And so there's been a take-home monthly ration that's been designed and implemented to that group. So just to finish, I think a few messages to take home and go on, maybe consider with the messages from the other speakers. School meals have a really great potential, not only to provide immediate energy needs of students, but to make nutritious diets on a whole more accessible for students, which has a long-term effect for nutrition and growth for these children. There does not need to be a one-size-fits-all approach. What I've shown today is just a snapshot of different modeling, different playing that we do to look at what's affordable, what's feasible, what different preferences are, and what can be done to fill gaps in a local context. And it's really important to consider these elements. But lastly as well, just including nutritious foods in the meal should not be a standalone intervention. We really need to couple this with education and behaviour change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francis, for this insightful presentation. And I'm sure we will get quite some questions about the modeling. I've already seen one in the chat box. But please, audience, write your questions into the Q&A section. So with this, I would like to move on to our second speaker. But again, before we start with the presentation, we have prepared another poll question for you to vote, audience. And so please, could I have the second question? So as you see, the second question is, do you think that biofortified crops are GMO crops? Please vote. I think you can stop the voting. So yes, the majority of the audience actually has understood that biofortified crops are no GMO crops. So with this, I would like to introduce our second speaker. It's Lynn Brown. She's Director of Alliances and Policy at Harvest Plus. Please, Lynn, all yours.
Thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This new virtual space is always, I think, far more challenging. I'd much rather be where I can see you all and see your responses. We're just waiting for the presentation to come up. But I thought the poll results were actually really interesting. And in a sense, the people who said they weren't sure are right, because the basic answer is that yes, they can be GMOs, but also they may not be GMOs. So let's go into the presentation. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So what is biofortification? So this is, if you like, the formal definition. And it's the formal definition for Harvest Plus. And so basically all of you who sort of farm or you have gardens or whatever know that plants actually cross with each other and, you know, get higher yields. So for hundreds of years, people have been breeding plants, generally to have a higher yield or a better fruit. We breed them to actually have more micronutrients within them. And for Harvest Plus, all the ones we do are conventionally bred. So these are not GMOs. The advantage is if you use a GMO technology, you can put micronutrients into the plant that wouldn't be there normally. So if you think of golden rice, it has vitamin A in, whereas no rice actually has vitamin A. So you have to bring it in from outside the plant. If you conventionally breed, you have to use what the plant already has. And so biofortification is actually really valuing the biodiversity that we have. So if you think about rice, there are hundreds of varieties of rice. The short grain, medium grain, long grain, brown rice, red rice, black rice. The nutrient profiles of all those rices are very, very different. And some have more iron and zinc than others do. So as a result of that, we're taking a crop in a country that has a really good yield, that's pest resistant, disease resistant, drought tolerant, salinity tolerant, and we're actually crossing that with a high yielding variety with a high target micronutrient variety. So when you come out the other end, you have a high yielding, pest resistant, disease resistant, climate smart variety, but one that also has a higher micronutrient content. So which crops do we have available? Thanks, Desmond. So at the minute, you can see we have quite an array of crops. We have beans, iron beans, vitamin A maize, zinc maize. So those are two separate maize varieties. Iron pearl millet, zinc wheat, vitamin A cassava, vitamin A sweet potato, and zinc rice. So it's an array of crops. And as you can tell, they're all the basic staple crops that people are eating around the world. And when we say we breed them to have a target micronutrient, our targets are vitamin A, iron, or zinc, because they're the critical micronutrient deficiencies today that we have in the world. When we say that, for example, if you look at the iron beans, it provides up to 80% of the daily iron needs. What do we mean by that? So when we set the target for our breeding, we're looking at the amount that people normally consume, and we're looking to deliver to a target. So in this case, the estimated average requirement, we are delivering 80% of the daily iron needs. So when you look at this, you haven't got to consume 3 pounds of maize in a day to get your vitamin A. You'll get 50% of your vitamin A just from consuming the normal amount that you would normally do. And as you can tell from each crop, it has the benefits for the farmer as well. Because at the end of the day, a farmer grows to sell it quite often. And they're not going to produce a variety that has a lower yield. Farming is a business. And so if you want to get them to grow crops with higher nutrition, they have got to be as good as the ones that they're already growing. So let's have just a quick look at what they would do for school children if you consume them. So once we've actually bred the crops, once we can see that we have the right amount of micronutrients, then we actually test them, because when you consume food, your body actually has to be able to access that micronutrient. So is it bioavailable? And will it make a difference when it's consumed? So that's the final stage of proving our crop before we take it out into the field. So as we can see from this, and I've only picked the ones that are relevant to school children, that the vitamin A maize improved the vitamin A status and the night vision, which is what we often look at for vitamin A, of 4 to 8-year-old children in Zambia. The vitamin A sweet potatoes also improved vitamin A deficiency status in Uganda, and it reduced the likelihood and duration of diarrhea in children in Mozambique. And I sort of also know, say in Mozambique, if you mill your sweet potatoes into flour and you substitute it into, for example, bread buns, then a small bread bun will actually deliver all the vitamin A needs of a child under 5. So in India, iron pearl millet improves the iron status and the physical and cognitive performance of school-going adolescents in India. And one of the things is that when we test these varieties, and particularly vitamin A varieties, many of you will know if you have more vitamin A in a crop, it will turn orange. Think of your basic orange carrot. And so you have to do a certain amount of education to show people that these crops are good, because they look different, and most people are cautious about eating something that looks different. So we found school children in Colombia like the Bio-Fortified beans because they prefer the color, the smell, the taste, the size. You know, it's all about what that crop tastes like at the end of the day. That's why we eat our food. And similarly in Kenya, primary school children prefer the vitamin A cassava over the non-Bio-Fortified counterpart. One of the things when you put vitamin A in is it tends to make a product slightly sweeter. So generally speaking, school children tend to prefer the vitamin A maize, cassava, and the sweet potatoes. So let's dig a little deeper into just one school meals program that was done in Uganda, funded by the World Bank. And as many of you know, schools often have a school garden. So we worked with these school gardens to introduce the iron beans and the orange flesh sweet potatoes. And the children helped tend those gardens. So there's a lot of training is going on at the same time. But then the harvest of the garden is integrated into the school meals program. And as part of that, and as what Francis referred to, nutrition education is provided in the classrooms. Why would you eat this? What's it's delivering? Why do you need vitamin A? Why do you need iron? But also what you find is, and I think many of you who have children know this, children are your greatest change agents, because often what they learn at school, they take home to their parents. And so particularly if they like the product, then they want to take it home. So in this case, they took home the sweet potato vines as well for their households to also grow. I think, you know, many school feeding programs, particularly in rural areas, procure locally. So, you know, this program was rolled out to many of the local smallholder farmers as well. So they were also growing these products, and so more was available for local production. So as increasing farmer incomes, it reduces your transportation costs, which is good in these days of climate change. And because they're getting meals that they like in school, it increases your pupil retention. And as a result of this program and it working well, and the government seeing impacts, they've expanded the school feeding program now nationwide, and potentially are going to incorporate biofortification into the national school feeding guidelines. And so on this next slide, we're just looking at a few other examples. So for example, in Nigeria, in several of the states, they've integrated biofortified foods. So I know that, for example, orange flesh sweet potato is now in the O-Meals program in Ozone. In Zimbabwe, WFP and the AU did an African Day of School Feeding in 2018, when we demonstrated a lot of the biofortified crops. And as a result, now 612 schools are piloting vitamin A maize and high iron beans. In India, iron pearl millet is integrated into the ICDS program, and we're looking to integrate it in other programs. And I don't know if many of you saw, but for FAO's 75th birthday, Prime Minister Modi actually launched a number of biofortified crops and made a commitment to biofortification. And India's already actually put in regulations that if you want to bring in new iron pearl millet varieties, they must have at least the iron content of the biofortified varieties that have been released. So this is really starting to mainstream nutrition into staple foods. And in Honduras, we have the iron beans in the program there. So as we move to the next slide. So what are the implications of COVID, and how would they affect biofortified crops? Well, you know, COVID's hit really hard. I mean, it's hit in terms of sickness and in health. It's impacted people who are providing healthcare, which is very often women in homes now. It's reduced jobs or made people work less hours. And what always happens when you have falling incomes is people switch their diets. I mean, the first thing they do is they cut out more expensive foods, which are the animal source foods from fruits and vegetables. Staple grains are always protected because they fill the belly. COVID is unlike some things because it actually also directly impacts on the food supply chain. Some shocks, any shock will always generally affect people's income, but COVID actually also impacts directly on the supply chain. And even in America, farmers were plowing vegetables back into their fields. Eggs weren't reaching the market because they couldn't repackage them correctly because they were used to producing them in more industrial boxes. So when you have biofortified crops in the food system, they're resilient. Because when you think about your supply chains, staple grains last for a long time. So you can have delays in the food system. It's okay, they will make it. You can't have those delays for animal source foods and fruits and vegetables. When you're school feeding and you're procuring locally, then you're relying on short supply chains. So they're readily available. And basically what we're saying is they're a resilient source of micronutrients, both in diets at home, but also in school feeding. And the fact that they are cheap, Francis's slides show the difference between your energy foods and your high nutrient value foods. So what we're doing is actually putting nutrients into those cheap energy foods to make the whole diet cheaper and to essentially reduce the costs of school feeding. So thank you very much, and I'll pass it back.
Also very insightful and also very interesting to see countries moving forward, and you're showing some successes. With this, I actually would like to move on to our last presentation. And again, we have prepared a poll question for the audience. And can I have the poll question, please, so that you can all vote? So as you see, the question is, what is the incremental cost per person per year of fortifying wheat flour with iron and folic acid? 12 cents, 50 cents, $1.20, or I'm not sure. We'll wait a bit more. I think we can close the polling. Can we share the results? Okay, well done. Well done. The right answer is actually 12 cents. And so with this, I would like to introduce our speaker from DSM, Monique Smorenborg, Director, Nutrition Improvement for the Africa region and Middle Eastern Europe. Please, Monique, all yours.
Thanks, Regina, and good day to everybody. So I will be talking about optimizing the resilience in times of COVID and the importance of micronutrients and food fortification to strengthen immunity for school children. So it's definitely not news to most that the COVID-19 pandemic has deepened the malnutrition crisis. The initial consequences of the pandemic gave rise to disruption of the food supply chain due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. And this, along with a global economic downturn and reduced family income, was linked to reduction in food calories as well as micronutrients for many. We also saw a disruption in access to critical services for health, nutrition and education, as well as social safety net program delivery. So what is most relevant in the context of today's discussion is the fact that due to lockdowns, over 100 countries imposed school closures, resulting in over 250 million children missing out on their daily meal at school. The pandemic thus has far-reaching increased risk on all forms of malnutrition. So when we're looking at specific micronutrients, micronutrients play a role in various organ functions, including those of the bones, skin, blood, lungs, brain, or the nervous system. And many of these are also essential for the development and functioning of the immune system. And here you'll see that a diverse array of micronutrients are responsible for the support of the immune system. Adults need to consume them to maintain good function, but expecting mothers and specifically growing children have elevated needs to meet the high demand for growth and development and immunity of the child. So here we're looking specifically at folic acid, vitamin A, vitamin B12, vitamin C, D, and E, as well as the minerals calcium, iron, and zinc. So food fortification really does offer a cost-effective opportunity to deliver immune micronutrients that strengthen our collective ability to fight and recover from infections. And in the context of a deepening crisis of hunger and malnutrition brought by COVID-19, fortifying staple foods such as maize meal, rice, wheat flour, cooking oil, and salt with essential vitamins and minerals becomes even more important in helping to make a more nutritious diet affordable and available to all. Fortification is an inexpensive and efficient way to increase the vitamin and mineral content of foods that people consume every day. Done well, it has the potential to improve diets across the entire population, including amongst vulnerable groups and especially amongst children. The World Bank and the Copenhagen Consensus have both ranked food fortification as one of the best investments in development in terms of cost effectiveness. Okay, so school meals are really one of the more effective ways to reach school children. Every day, millions of children around the world do go to school on an empty stomach, and hunger will affect their concentration and their ability to learn. So if we hop to the next slide. So there are various pathways and entry points for nutrition-sensitive school feeding, and this does look like quite a busy slide, but I just want to highlight that amongst the services offered for children of school age, being deworming and clean water or meal fortification, along with school-based nutrition education, and then thirdly, diversified and fortified school meals and snacks. Especially in this last intervention, we see that this impacts the child's food intake and dietary diversity, which will directly impact a child's nutrition, their physical growth, their micronutrient status, and an anemia status. It also directly impacts a child's cognitive function, their attention and learning capacity, as well as the education access in the school enrollment and attendance. The medium-term effects on this are that we see child development and school achievement. So there really are various opportunities for school meal programs. School meals provide safety nets, incentivize school enrollment and regular attendance. School meal programs ideally offer a complete package, so of nutrition education, as has been mentioned previously, nutrient-dense food provision, and school-based health and nutrition services. And then nutrition school meals can offer benefits to school children in the case of improved micronutrient status, as well as supporting physical and cognitive function. Fortified foods form an important part of school menus, and there was a survey done called the Global Survey of School Meal Programs, where it was seen that 87% of school meal programs cite the goal of improving students' nutrition amongst their objectives. And 68% of these programs serve fortified foods on school menus, and commonly fortified foods include oil, salt, grains or cereals, which are will include rice, and corn soya blends or biscuits. And the most common micronutrients added to these foods include iron, iodine, vitamin A, zinc, and folic acid, amongst others. So looking specifically at rice fortification here, this is a vehicle for adding back rice fortification adds back that which is lost during the milling process. So similar when we're looking at fortification, similar to maize and wheat flour fortification, we can fortify with iron, folic acid, vitamin B12, vitamin A, and zinc. And then one would look at also adding those lost during the milling process, and a focus is on vitamin B1, vitamin B6, and vitamin B3. So I really don't want to go into detail here, but this slide is really just to highlight the science that is available for the efficacy of fortified rice in school feeding. This table really highlights the fact that fortified foods is used as a nutrient-dense vehicle in school feeding in many countries in the world. So rice fortification has been implemented in countries like India, Bhutan, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Peru. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of focus on West Africa as well. So to just give a summary of that evidence we just saw, and to show that there is an impact and a potential of fortification to increase the micronutrient resiliency of school meals, we have noticed science that falls into the categories of improved nutrition status, so reducing anemia and iron deficiency anemia, improved zinc and iron status, improved vitamin A and B vitamin and folate status as well. And other health benefits also include improved physical performance as well as the improved cognition. And finally, I just wanted to share some examples of food fortification interventions that are specific to Africa. So we would have touched on a few interventions that were more globally relevant. But here, when we look specifically at Africa, there are two categories that I would like to touch on. First is the micronutrient powders. And examples here are micronutrient powder for school children targeted in Zambia, and this was to address the micronutrient deficiencies among school children and to encourage the government to adopt food fortification as a priority strategy. And this was developed as a micronutrient powder that can be mixed with school meals as part of a school meal program in Zambia. And the second example is that DSM partnered with Bio-Fortification micronutrient powder in Madagascar to support school-aged children as part of their school meals. And this would be added to commonly consumed foods during the school meals. And then with regards to a rice fortification snapshot, in Senegal, there is a school feeding pilot underway with WFP, looking at incorporating fortified rice into these school meals. In Madagascar, we are seeing really increased interest in the fortification of rice and which interventions can be used to target various micronutrient deficiencies for various age groups. And then, interestingly enough, we are actually seeing another partner incorporate fortified rice into ready-to-eat meals that are also targeted at school children. So thank you for your time, and that's everything from me.
DSM. This workshop is the second of a series of 3 workshops to ensure as many GCNF 2020 participants as possible can join. So please tell your friends and colleagues who could not join today, they have another opportunity on November 10th. Before I go into the details of the workshop, I'd like to do some housekeeping rules. All the participants, you will be muted during the session, and we are encouraging you. You will see a Q&A question on your toolbar on the bottom that you actually put your questions into there. The session will be recorded and presentations will be shared. And we are actually providing a link with all the materials, the pre-reads and the presentations that are used in this seminar. So you could actually access this then. So the title of the breakout session is Nutrient-Enriched School Meals Are More Important Than Ever. And yes, the title is spot on, as we have seen that in the recent times of a pandemic such as COVID-19, Nutritious meals are important to enhance immunity and resilience against infections and disease. And the role of nutritious school meals is vital. So today in our session, we will look very closely at innovative approaches to school feeding, understand the role of micronutrients in a school child's diet, understand the impact and potential of fortification and bio-fortification to increase the micronutrient resiliency of school meals, and how school meals can reach the most vulnerable, which is even more vital in COVID-19 times. We will have 3 presentations followed by a question and answer session. And please, the audience, I encourage you to already type your questions then into the box, the question box, and send to us. We have also prepared for you a poll question. So before we start our presentation, we're actually asking you to vote. And can I please have the first poll question? So as you see here, the question is, what is the incremental cost per person per year of fortifying wheat flour with iron and folic acid? So we would like to ask the participants to vote. We'll wait for a bit. So I encourage all the participants who are online to actually go and vote, because I think we still have more. Okay, but not to withhold too much. I think we should stop the voting. And there is room for improvement, because that's not the right answer. It's not 50 cents per year. It's actually 12 cents per year. So with this, I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, Akanksha Nayar from DSM. She is the Manager, Nutrition Improvement South Asia. Please, Akanksha, all yours.
Thanks, Regina. And good evening, good afternoon, and actually late in the evening for me. I'm based out of India. Firstly, thanks to all the partners for giving me this opportunity. I think as the topic actually says, the breakout session today would focus on how school meals are very important and how food fortification can play a role in strengthening immunity for school children. Can we move to the first slide, please? So if you look at COVID, while COVID times actually appear to fewer, while the cases of COVID in children appears to be very few, because generally the symptoms are very mild, national responses to the pandemic can have important consequences on child nutrition and education outcomes. Now, if you see, nearly 1.5 billion children, and which is more than half of world's student population, are being kept away from school due to the pandemic responses measures. Nationwide, schools are closed in almost 180 countries while this pandemic was panning out. This disruption and closure of schools around the world will not only have a negative effect on the child's right to education, but of course it'll also have a consequence to their providing adequate food to the children. More than 265 million children were not receiving the meals that they were dependent on. With that the background, I think it's critical now more than ever to sort of start focusing on how can we sort of mitigate the challenges that might have been caused. Because if you look at the population, those children might already be deficit of nutrients largely. So yeah, next slide, please. Before we sort of, a deep dive into how we can fix, or include micronutrients in the school meals, it's very important for us to understand the importance of micronutrients, and how do they support immunity. Now, many of the micronutrients are essential for development, and functioning. And if you look at the screen right now, each of these vitamins are some or the other way connected to our immune system. So either Either they support the immune system or they help to boost the immune system. And adults need to consume, them to maintain good function, but expecting mothers and growing children have elevated needs to meet the demand for growth and development and immunity for the child. Now, FAO actually says that no dietary supplement is actually proven as yet to, mitigate or to sort of prevent the COVID infection. But what micronutrients can actually do is that they can support to build a healthy immune system. And healthy immune system can actually help us to fight infections. And hence it's very important, it's critical for us to maintain a nutrient-rich diet in times of the COVID-19. Now, the question is that how do we actually, target getting the nutrients to the children when the COVID scenario is on? We'll see that in the next slide. So the easiest way, to actually reach out to the school, to the children is the school meals, because millions of children around the world actually go to school with an empty stomach. And there have been studies that show that particularly girls, millions of girls get impacted, by not getting adequate food. And hence school meals could be a good channel to sort of integrate micronutrients, to sort of get it to the people. Now, I think in the next slide, let's just quickly see that how does school feeding affects the child development. Now, if you look at my screen, school feeding has various impact on children and their long in terms of the intermediate, direct, medium term effects. If you look at the intermediate effects, it impacts the child's health, food and nutrition behaviors, food intake, and dietary diversity. In the direct impacts, nutrition, macronutrient status, cognitive function, and educational access. When we go on to the medium term, effects, the child development and school achievement is something that we can see as a few parameters. And in the long term, I think household food security and income is something that would be stable if only we were to sort of work on the school meals that are provided to the kids today. Next slide, please. Next, thanks. So what are the opportunities that we have, if we were to sort of work around the school meals, or if we enhance the school meals? Not only would it incentivize more kids to come to school, which basically has like a regular attendance, it also gives us a complete package of providing nutrition education, nutrient dense food, and also other indirect services which impact nutrition status of the children. Nutrition school meals can also benefit school children in improving the micronutrient status, their cognitive function, as we discussed before. And it also gives an opportunity, for different actors, as in, different departments of the governance, and also in the school or parents, everyone to sort of come together and build up the nutrition for these kids. Now, the question comes that this background is perfect, but how do we actually integrate micronutrients in the school meals? Now, if you look at, data actually suggests that 68% of the programs, if you analyze, they serve fortified menu in some or the other way, be it common salt, be in terms of salt, be in terms of cereals, be in terms of soy blend, biscuits, etc. And most of these concentrate on iron, iodine, vitamin A, zinc, folic acid. What we suggest is that, and studies have actually proven that there are two tools or two strategies that actually can be integrated into school meals very easily. One is staple food fortification with a focus on rice fortification, and the other one is micronutrient powders. Now let's actually see how staple food fortification plays an important role or is a powerful tool to actually address the micronutrient deficiency in the population. Staple food fortification is a tool through which we can integrate micronutrients in our everyday food. It's an easier way to sort of reach out to population at wide. You don't have to change the dietary habits. We don't need a major BCC around, to integrate staple food fortification in what's already being taken by people. It's proven to be effective. The return on investment is great. And also lastly, and resonating with what the poll question was, it is cost effective. It does not cost a lot to sort of fortify the staples that are already been, taken or intaken by the people. Next slide, please. Now, while we see that staple food fortification can be an important tool and it's easy to adapt and use, what rice fortification is one of the easiest sort of commodity that should looked at being fortified. Even though today, the rice consumption, and if you look at Asia, 60% of the population does consume rice as one of the staples, sadly only 1% of the rice is actually getting fortified. Now, when you see rice and when it gets milled, a lot of these micronutrients are actually being lost in the process. And hence, rice fortification is a tool in which we can integrate those lost micronutrients back in the kernel. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So back, please. Yeah. So what we did was, and to sort of, justify that rice fortification actually impacts and it gives us improved results. We collated like a lot of studies that happened across the globe to understand, the impact of rice fortification on the population. And to sum this table up, it leads to improved nutrition status. It reduces anemia and iron deficiency anemia. It improves the iron stores and zinc stores. It improves vitamin A, B1, B2, B12, and folate status. The other health benefits that actually we can sort of get through this is improved physical performance and improved cognition. Next slide, please. Now, here are a few examples that I've picked up from APAC region, where rice fortification is being used as a tool, and has been integrated in the school feeding programs and has actually shown result. One of such example, is from India, where in the state of Orissa, the government has actually taken rice fortification, integrated in the school feeding program, and that has actually shown results in the anemia status of the children. If you look at the current status, the government has actually decided to supply fortified rice through the midday meals, as a fight against malnutrition, which would include B12, iron, and folic acid. Also, in times of COVID, there were provisions done to the school feeding systems by the government of India, as they were providing dry rations to the children or to the families, so that gap does not actually broaden. In Bhutan, if you look on the right side, fortified rice is supplied as part of the school meal program in 171 schools, which serves around 15,000 students. It's been supported. We sort of worked on assisting technically for the program. And if you look at Cambodia, besides, they were added like another element, which is called rice, giving fortified rice in the breakfast as well, to the school, additional to the school meals that are being sort of given to the children. Next slide, please. Not only that, micronutrient powder could be like a very powerful tool as well to integrate, and it's simple to use. In India, one of such example could be that WFP in its programs integrated, usage of micronutrient powders in the curry that's been, cooked to be given along with rice in India. These micronutrient powders can be mixed in any, curry preparations that you're doing, and it would not lead to any taste change or color change or like flavor change. And also it ensures that, the micronutrient gaps are filled. I think lastly, I would just sum up my presentation saying that, access to nutritious, safe and affordable diets needs to be safeguarded and promoted as a cornerstone to respond to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kangsha. I know that you will be leaving us after this presentation, but just your examples that you brought about India, I was just wondering if you could make some comments on how India is actually embracing in general fortified rice and how they take it up. And then also, how does it work? Maybe you can make some comments on, there are different rice types. So it's not an issue if you want to fortify rice, and we have different shapes of rice kernels and so on. So maybe you could just give some comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Regina. I think I'll start with what's happening in India, because I think lately India's been taking the whole policy of rice fortification in a snowball. A lot is happening on ground in terms of also the development partners taking their part, spreading awareness about fortified rice. Even the government has actually taken it core, and is making it a part of their own policy. Today itself, as we are talking in the evening, the government actually placed out a statement that they, in the span of next 3 years, they've shortlisted 112 aspirational districts where they want to roll out rice fortification, which is a massive thing for India. Because if these demonstrative pilots can actually, prove to be effective, the day is not far that we can see mandatory fortification, rice fortification in India. So, the government has also set apart, say, around $23 million of fund just to sort of make this happen, which is massive. So yes, it's happening. It's happening in a great way. I mean, apart from rice, we do see that oil and milk would be mandated very, very soon. And the government is doing their best because, to sort of put forward rice fortification in India in terms of the policy. That's the first part. I think with respect to the technical aspect of, if we can fortify any kind of rice, yes, we can. The technology is such that, be it like a long grain or a short grain or like a broken rice, we can actually match. And if it's like pale or if it's like bright white, we can actually match any kind of rice with the extrusion technology. So yeah, that can be achievable with of course the add-on that there is no change in color, taste, or smell of the product if once you were to mix it. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Akanksha, and well, have a nice evening, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, and apologies for me to leave.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
you. We have also possibility, I know that we have some questions from the audience for Akanksha, but we also have a DSM booth. And with this, I would like to introduce our third speaker, Pinto Soraya. She is the Nutrition Improvement Marketing Manager for Latin America, and she works with DSM. Please, Soraya, all yours.
Thank you, Regina. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to be here to talk about the importance of micronutrients and food fortification to strengthen nutrition and immunity for school children. And yes, to the question, yes, fortified foods is an expensive, but also is a very effective opportunity to improve the nutrition for school children. Please, to the next slide. The COVID-19 pandemic deepens the malnutrition crisis, and the initial consequences of the pandemic gave rise to the disruption of the food supply chain due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. And this, along with the global economic downturn and reduced family income, was linked to reduction in food calories and micronutrients for many. Lockdown also gave rise to disruption in critical services delivery, as well as social safety net program delivery. Most relevant in context of today's lockdowns is the fact that over 100 countries were affected, were resulting in closures of many schools, and over 250 million children missed out on their daily meals food. The pandemic thus has far-reaching increased risk in all forms of malnutrition, as shown there. Please, to the next slide. Micronutrients play a role in various organ functions, including those of bones, skin, blood, lungs, brain, or nervous system. Many of the micronutrients are also essential for the development and functioning of immune system. Here you will see that a diverse array of micronutrients are responsible for the support of the immune system. Adults need to consume them to maintain good function, but expecting mothers and growing children have elevated needs to meet the high demands of growth and development and immunity of child. The FAO highlights the importance of good nutrition before, during, and after infection. While no foods or dietary supplements can prevent COVID-19 infection, maintaining a nutrition diet is important to supporting a healthy immune system to fight infections. Infections can deprive the body's nutrient stores so that the body needs extra nutrients during recovery. Therefore, a nutritious diet is critical throughout the COVID pandemic. Food fortification offers a cost-effective opportunity to deliver immune micronutrients that strengthen our collective ability to fight and recover from infections. In the context of a deepening crisis of hunger and malnutrition brought by COVID pandemic, fortifying staples such as maize meal, wheat flour, rice, corn flour, cooking oil, with essential vitamins and minerals becomes even more important in helping to make a more nutritious diet affordable and available for all. Fortification is an inexpensive and efficient way to increase the vitamin and mineral content of foods that people consume every day, as was mentioned before. And when you done well, it has the potential to improve diets across the entire population, including among vulnerable groups. The World Bank and Copenhagen Consensus have both ranked food fortification as one of the best investments in development in terms of cost effectiveness. School meals, next please. School meals are the most effective way to reach school children, as was mentioned before. And there is a report here that shows that every day millions of children around the world go to school with an empty stomach. So nothing to say additional to that. Next slide, please. This graph really is a little full of words, but just to mention that school meals have different effects on children. Intermediate, direct, and medium effects, but all are linked with food intake, dietary diversity, with nutrition, micronutrient status, and the medium-term effects are linked to child development and school achievement. And in the long term, we can say that the household food security and income is also impacted. So with this slide, we can say that there are full opportunities for school meal programs. The World Food Program has six decades of experience supporting school feeding and health initiatives and working with more than 100 countries to set up sustainable national school feeding programs. So please check main attributes recognized for school feeding, but I draw your attention to the point that school meals provide an opportunity for different actors to join forces, for countries to contribute to their nutrition goals. And I think it is very important that we change our way to think about school feeding and change to school nourishing, because ensuring that school meals are nutrients, rich nutrients or dense in nutrients is very, very important. Next slide, please. This is a global survey of school meal programs that was performed in 2019. And in general, there are two things which that I want to draw your attention. One is that the 87% of the school meal programs cite the goal of improving students' nutrition among their objectives. For sure, it is one of the really key factors. But the other thing that I draw your attention is that 68% of programs serve fortified foods on school menu, and they claim to have many staples there, mainly with iron, iodine, vitamin A, zinc, and folic acid. I think there is an opportunity here in Latin America to have and to follow that initiative. Next slide, please. And when we talk about rice, milled rice has fewer nutrients than a meal rice, as you check there with the columns. And in some cases, there are losses that are up to 80%. And in the case of vitamin B3 and iron, for example. And based on the available evidence and efficacy and stability and the needs, the following micronutrients that are there are recommended for rice fortification. In Peru, many of them are included in the rice. But first, similar to maize and wheat flour fortification, following WHO guidelines that are the iron, folic acid, vitamin B12, vitamin A, and zinc. But also it is possible, it is good to add micronutrients that are lost during milling, like the orders that are there. Please check, this is really a crowded slide, but it's just to mention that there are many studies, at least 12 published in different countries with a positive health outcomes of fortified rice in school children, that it's good. And please, next slide. Yes, thank you. I would like to just draw your attention to this study that in which it was done in Karnataka in India, and where there was given for 2 years to the students fortified rice. And as you realize that there is a very positive outcomes, not only in health indicators, but also in the school's results, in absenteeism. It's a very interesting study. There are many others, but due to the time, I decided not to show you this. But this is a very good and nice evidence with school feeding in India. Please go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And it was mentioned before, increase staple food, fortified staple food, especially fortified rice, is very, very good. And in Latin America, we have a very strong case. There is the following Peru success story, because it's very good to see that many schools in the country can have the opportunity to have a fortified rice. Caliwarma both in 2019, like 12,000 metric tons to cover around 2.5 million school children in the country. And the country has the promulgation of the homologation sheets. And yes, it is very important that the public and social sector has the information and has trained and has the knowledge to take advantage of this opportunity for school programs. We know that this year was affected the many systems and also the coverage of this in Peru, of this program in Peru. But it's a very good example. And really, it's a main fact that malnutrition could exacerbate the effects of COVID-19 in mothers and children. So the access to nutritious, safe and affordable diets needs to be safeguarded and promoted. And talking about the school feeding, to enhance school feeding programs in Latin America, there are two very key important points. One, to have staple food fortification, like rice fortification available, but also the other alternative is to use micronutrient powders to improve not only the nutrition status of the population, but also to have other health benefits. And with that, I think I finished. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Soraya. Very interesting to hear some of the examples from South America. With this, actually, I would like to to ask Soraya, please come back on screen because we are starting our QA session. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we are coming to the end of our Q&A session. A big thank you to the presenters and your answers to the questions, and thank you for the audience to actually brought forward some of the questions. I'm not going to summarize the whole discussion we had, but I think there are a couple of maybe three key messages. One, absolutely clear, I think everybody agreed on that. School meals are extremely important, as in poor communities, and this also includes affluent countries now. Often school meals are the only meals the children eat. And when we look around in COVID times, we have seen this in affluent countries, that there is a huge issue about school meals. And so we can imagine that in countries where there is less availability and less affordability, that it is really a challenge to bring nutritious school meals to children, particularly when we have millions of schools closed. And in COVID times, bringing essential vitamins and minerals through nutritious foods to the school children is more important than ever. I think we've heard about the importance, the role of micronutrients for immunity, resilience, and so on. So I think that's also a clear message we have. COVID-19 has clearly taught us that food systems need to be resilient and that falling incomes mean even higher stable crop consumptions. We had a discussion about this. I think, Lynn, you pointed this out very well. And both speakers also, you mentioned that we have to look at diet quality and not only at quantity. So that's why Bio-Fortified stables is actually, as Lynn said, sort of a low-brainer, because at least you would have some micronutrients while you rely on your belly. Post-harvest food fortification is a safe, proven, fully or any other food more nutritious by adding back or more the vitamins and minerals that are lost in the food processing. I think we have discussed this. Fortified staples such as wheat, maize flour, fortified rice, edible oil, and others need to be part of a nutritious school meal, and food producers need to adopt food fortification, be it bio-fortification or post-harvest fortification, as a complementary strategy to improve nutrition for school children, as well as for the whole population. I think there's also a big consent about this, and there's agreement, and the initiative about filling the nutrient gap by WFP brings argument forwards to actually underscore how important a nutritious diet is, and if it's a problem in terms of affordability, we can actually lean on fortified foods, and we can actually then bring micronutrients to the table. Lastly, we've also discussed about this. Multiple sectoral partnerships are key to further improving school meals, and only by working together we can actually achieve the noble goal of making nutritious school meals available to all the school children we have. So I think those were the main messages. And with this, I would again thank you, all of you. And I would also like to thank the Global Child Nutrition Foundation for making this breakout session available to everybody. Thanking for the translators. I assume you have done a very good job. And with this, I would like to say goodbye and have a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. Bye.